it's Hailey Reese, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am so beyond grateful that you are here, and I really and truly do hope that you're having an absolutely incredible morning, afternoon, or night, whatever it is for you when this video finally reaches you. Today's video is one that has come highly requested. Recently, here on my channel, we've dove once again into an absolutely disturbing and terrifying, but true Ouija board experience. And I got so many questions from you asking whether or not there were more experiences like this. Now, unfortunately, and sadly, there are a ton of Ouija board experiences where things have gone absolutely and horribly wrong. Today, we're talking about one of the scariest true Ouija board experiences ever shared. And tonight, well, we're diving into what exactly happened. So with that being said, sit back, relax, and maybe turn a light on, because this story in this video is about to get very dark. This case began back in October of 2019, and this took place in Ohio with a 24-year-old girl named Mara. Now, at the time, Mara was working nights at a 24-hour diner and also studying graphic design. She lived with her brother in a 2-bedroom duplex at the edge of town, and they lived alone with their dog that was a golden retriever named June. I always have a soft spot for golden retrievers because I grew up with one and my dad's have one, so that was kind of a fun note. But the two of them were going through a pretty hard time and really had to lean a lot on each other. Mara was somebody who really tended to keep to herself. She was more of a homebody and just somebody who was a lot more reserved. She definitely wasn't one of the most social people in the town or where she lived, but she would hang out often with her two friends, Allie and Ray. Allie was an elementary school teacher, and Ray actually worked at the local theater. Now, apparently, the three of them were actually kind of an odd-looking group if you'd see them side by side or out together and you didn't know them. But if you did know them, you would know that they'd all grown up together, so much so that their families were all kind of like family, and they really had became like those friendships or relationships that you see on TV where they just like walk into each other's houses and start eating the snacks, or don't even knock or announce their presence, but suddenly they're on your couch. That's kind of how the three of them were described. At this point in Mara's life, she'd really been scraping at the edges of stability for months. There had been a really dramatic and ultimately traumatic family event that had taken place that would leave both Mara and her brother pretty much on their own. It said that their parents left them with basically nothing, and that Mara's brother was shouldering the rent and responsibility of keeping it together, all while Mara seemed to be falling into this really dark and really off headspace. Mara didn't open up with people, as I'd mentioned, and she really wasn't forthcoming with how she was feeling, but it was pretty obvious to her friends and her brother that something was wrong. Her social media posts had gotten pretty dark, and it really seemed like every now and then there was like this break in her poker face, as they described it, where it would show that underneath that smile she was forcing, she was really hiding a lot of deeper and more emotional feelings. And this wasn't just something that her friends were suspicious about. Anytime that they would ask her to come and hang out, it seemed like Ray and Allie had to start forcing Mara to do basically anything. Well, I had mentioned before that Mara was somebody who really kept to herself. That was an exception with Allie and Ray. She was always open and ready to do anything that they wanted to do, even if it was as simple as just all hanging out on the couch and watching a show together. So it was really weird and unusual when Mara didn't want to join in, or was more so reluctant to join in on any of their plans. And whenever she did finally join in on the plans, they said it really seemed like she'd rather be anywhere but there. She was really spacey and just obviously not present. So when Mara would unexpectedly call them all excited, it was pretty shocking, but it was also a really, really pleasant surprise. Mara basically calls them both over the moon excited, telling them how she really needed something to get her mind out of this black hole. That was how she described it, this black hole that it had been in, and that she'd actually bought a Ouija board that she was really excited about. She started telling them that they should come over soon and play with this Ouija board with her as like an early Halloween thing. As I mentioned, it was October, so that wasn't unusual. But it was unusual for Mara. She wasn't the type of person prior to this, even prior to her life taking the crazy turn that it had, that would be seen doing anything like this. Mara wasn't religious, she wasn't spiritual, she wasn't even really into scary movies. But her friends hadn't heard this kind of like joy or excitement coming from her in a very long time. So the plan was set. They wanted to do whatever Mara was suddenly excited to do. They decided they were going to get pizza, light some candles, and then see whatever this board had to say, basically. All right, so let's paint the picture here for a minute, right? The night starts and Mara's energy that she had on the phone is still completely there. Her brother's away for the night, so it's only Mara at home, and she was described by her friends as like this kid on Christmas morning with their new gift. Apparently, she was like pacing around with this new board, all excited in a way like she'd won it somewhere or something. I don't know. I'm kind of picturing like the kid at Christmas who gets that new toy that they've just been anticipating, and they're like showing it to everyone as they come in for Christmas dinner, and they just seemingly won't put it down. That's basically how Mara and the board were described. So apparently though, the board looked to be really, really old and used. It definitely didn't look like it was something that was just bought or that it was like brand new out of the box. And it didn't even look like Mara could have used it in the time from when she said she got it on the phone till now. Like this board looked used. It was an old Ouija board. So they got the board out and they're looking at Mara, asking her basically like, hey, what made you want to do this? And where'd you get the board? Mara apparently grabs the pizza and pulls it off the counter, putting it on the floor by the Ouija board setup that she'd created. She then starts to tell them how she ended up in some secondhand store and had seen the board. She said she wasn't sure why, but the board completely changed her mood and made her excited like she hadn't been in a while. She said that she felt like drawn into the board, like she just knew this was like the solution to everything that she'd been feeling, and immediately she knew she had to play it with her best friends. So the setup that she'd made wasn't anything too special, right? It's just the board and the planchette in the middle of her living room floor. She'd surrounded the area with some tea candles that she'd put into jars like all around, and she turned the lights down to like set the ambiance. The only thing that was lighting up the room was these candles that she'd lit. So the three of them sit down in Mara's living room that's now lit by this candlelight, and they basically decide to let Mara take the lead, as this was what she wanted to do, and none of them had ever done anything like this before. It said that they started asking the Ouija board and anything around them pretty simple yes or no questions, starting with the usual, is anyone here? The are you dead? The do you want to talk to us? And very quickly the board starts responding, yes, yes, and yes. Ray and Allie both later admitted that they were sure that Mara was the one doing this and that this was some sort of act. They said that the planchette moved almost too quickly and that Mara seemed like she'd gotten into some sort of character. As the questions went on, Mara's eyes were like twitching and rolling around, and she was grinning in this unnatural way. They actually described it as like some sort of fortune teller in a trance in a movie, where it's like this whole show and spectacle going on that's meant for like entertainment purposes, not real life. But it started to get stranger because Mara wasn't laughing. It was like she was completely enchanted by everything going on the board. Mara's eyes are like rolling into the back of her head and completely vibrating. And that's when the planchette starts to move all over the board in a way that really feels like now somebody is forcefully pushing it. At this point, both Ray and Allie claim that they're starting to feel very, very uncomfortable, and the board starts to spell out complete words and sentences. Things like, I live in the mirrors, let me inside, and then repeatedly spelling Mara's name over and over and over again. And at the time, again, this is all feeding into this idea that they have that Mara's putting on some sort of a strange show. That's when they notice that the room becomes freezing cold, and suddenly the energy that just felt weird and performative and off suddenly feels very, very wrong. The room starts to feel darker than just the lighting. It's cold, and they both get this feeling that something very dangerous is around them. That's the best way that they could describe it. They say that they start to both at this time feel like they need to stop, that whether it's an act or not, this isn't right. They're not having any fun. And that's when Mara, who is still in this trance, looks up at them and says in a voice that doesn't sound like hers at all, "Why are you doing this?" Apparently she's looking at them, but her eyes are empty and so dark. Mara typically had these light hazel eyes, and they now seemed almost black in front of her friends. And she's asking, "Why are you doing this?" in this dark, evil, and growly voice. Mara still has her hands on the planchette, as do her friends, but they're frozen in fear as it starts to spell out, "Make them leave." Make them leave. Can you imagine this, you guys? Like, truly picture being there with your friend who's acting so bizarre, and suddenly the board's saying, "Make them leave," in forceful movements. So creepy. Allie's super freaked out, but now at this point, she actually starts to feel a little bit annoyed by the whole thing. Mara hasn't really been hanging out with them the way that she used to, and now that she is, it's like she's trying to scare them. She felt very intimidated by her. And again, she just feels offended. She's like, what is this? This is performative. It's really, really putting a lot of fear into the room. For what reason? Like, she just doesn't want to do it anymore, basically. And that's when Mara is said to rip her hands off of the board and growl at them as if she could read their thoughts, saying, "If you think it's so fake, leave. I'm already let inside." They said at this point, it was like the blood had drained from them. These were thoughts that were going on inside their head. They both later would confide in each other and say, "Hey, like, what were you thinking at this time?" And they were both thinking, like, this is fake. What is she doing? We need to leave. This isn't right. And Mara suddenly just says, "If you think it's so fake, leave. I'm already inside," in a growling and evil voice. Ugh, it's giving me the chills imagining it. But things only get worse. Mara starts to scream, and banging starts to fill the walls. They can all hear this like banging from the inside of the walls. Again, Mara lived in a duplex, but this was unnatural, and it was an overwhelming amount. Mara continues to snarl at them, telling them to leave. And almost on cue, they hear this massive crash in the dining room. As they look over, they see that the mirror that was mounted on the dining room wall has fallen off and completely shattered. By now, Mara's completely isolated in the corner, almost in a crawling position, and she's like whispering to herself. And her friends have absolutely no idea what to do here. I don't think anyone would know how to properly handle a situation like this. Out of nowhere, she suddenly just goes from like this crouched and crawling position to completely falling onto the floor. And as she's just laying there, her friends come over running, and they're like trying to shake her awake, thinking like, do we call 911? Do we call her brother? Like, what do we do? And that's when Mara comes to, but says that she remembers absolutely nothing. It was like she was coming out of this trance. She was really out of it. And again, she had no memory of what had just occurred. Mara doesn't want them to call an ambulance, and she's able to verbally voice this. So they end up calling her brother, and he rushes home early from whatever it is that he was doing. And at this point, Mara is seemingly just acting really, really agitated and annoyed that they're doing all of this, kind of acting like, you guys are ruining the night. Like, what's wrong with you? Why don't you want to continue our night? Why are you calling my brother? You're bothering him. But even when he came home and he saw the mess of the glass from the mirror and the way that Mara was acting, he was like, no, thank you for calling me. This is not right. But Allie and Ray wouldn't hear from her for days. Now, when they would finally go and talk to her brother because they're really concerned, he basically said that she'd pretty much stopped talking altogether, that he'd been working with a doctor about it, but Mara didn't want to talk. Instead, she would draw and sketch these like really dark and disturbing things. And what's even creepier is that Mara was said to be one of the furthest things from an artist prior to all of this. And the drawings that she was creating were like these artist level sketches. It was really, really odd, honestly. The three of them really didn't hang out together much anymore. And by 2022, Mara had moved out of the country. This over 20-year friendship seemed to really just change overnight. And like, yes, Mara was going through a lot, but it was like after this Ouija board and that horrifying night, everything changed. As they look back on the night, they realize now that something was very, very wrong. The banging in the walls, the crashing of the mirror that was properly bolted and secured in that wall, the bleeding of Mara's nose and the voice coming out of her, it was really eerie. And in 2014, Allie finally started opening up to people about what had happened. She started looking more into Ouija boards and experiences and reaching out to community to talk about her own that she'd kept in for a couple of years and really haunted her at night. Like, it never sat right with Allie. And that's when others told Allie that they were pretty certain a Ouija board demon had called out to Mara, and that Mara had basically climbed right into its lap. Allie and Ray apparently did try to tell Mara and her brother about how worried they were with everything that had happened, but they never heard back. And now they just occasionally see Mara's brother's posts online, but it's like Mara's disappeared completely, and nobody knows what happened. Allie and Ray both say that to this day, they know that something very, very evil seemingly attached itself to Mara. And when they look back on the fact that Mara had said in this voice that wasn't hers that it was already let in, it makes them think that whatever it was had possessed her. The theory that they've came up with basically goes that they believe in Mara's darkness and darkened headspace, she'd found herself in the presence of a Ouija board that perhaps had been an opened portal to something darker and far more evil. That perhaps in a way it had reached out to Mara, creating some sort of bond or attachment between them and Mara, and through playing the Ouija board, it seems as though Mara let something in. What's even eerier is they never said goodbye. They never properly closed out the board, meaning that portal was left open. And they were never able to close out the game because, again, they never really saw Mara after this, and the board had stayed with her. So that is basically where the story ends for all of us. That's all we know about what happened. Now, I want to know from you, do you think that Mara was possessed, or do you think it was just some sort of really dark encounter with the Ouija board? I would absolutely love to know all of your thoughts down below. But that is it for today's video. If you guys are new to my channel, or you are just not yet subscribed but you do enjoy my content, I'm uploading a new video every single day. So make sure to go ahead and click that subscribe button if you do enjoy my content and would like to see more of me. And if you did enjoy it, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up, as I really, really appreciate that. Remember, my loves, do all things with kindness. And until tomorrow, I love you. Bye, guys.